Passed out a little outline for everybody, kind of just follow along. Also gave you a holy card and a medal for St. Benedict. So our reports on St. Joseph.
And St. Benedict was a simple monk. That's what this is, a simple report.
Actually, a lot of the stuff we were talking about earlier, you're going to hear some of this.
Yeah.
I'm going to read some stuff from things that you guys were talking about. It's actually kind of funny. But anyway, we'll begin our reports on St. Benedict and also Benedictine spirituality. And most of what we know about St. Benedict actually comes from St. Gregory the Great, the Pope. So I'm going to talk a little bit about him, because in order to understand a little bit about Benedict, he's the one that all the information we have basically comes from St. Gregory. Anyway, St. Gregory was born in 540, which was 7 years before Benedict died. But when St. Gregory was about 35 years old, he had a real high public office in Rome. And he gave it all up to enter religious life as an ordinary Benedictine monk. He had a nice house. He sold everything in there and converted his house to a monastery, St. Andrew's Monastery, and he stayed there as a monk. He was eventually elected Pope in 590. It was during his pontificate that St. Gregory cultivated Benedictine monasticism, which we've been talking about. He did that a lot during his pontificate. He also wrote 4 books that were known as the Dialogues of St. Gregory. And the entire second book of the 4 is devoted to St. Benedict, his life and his miracles. And the book is not necessarily a chronological biography like we're probably used to reading, but it consists of miracles in St. Gregory's life. And what he did is he actually spoke with about 3 or 4 of his disciples who gave him all of this information. And he put it down in the form of a book, the second book of the dialogue. And the church places great emphasis on the accuracy of his books because of who St. Gregory was. He was a pope. He's also considered a doctor and a father of the church. So kind of, probably what he wrote is, pretty good stuff.
And I'll tell you a little bit about the life of St. Benedict. Benedict was born in Nursia, a city in the central region of Italy, to a very noble and wealthy family. He is considered the founder of Western Christian monasticism. Benedict also wrote the Rule of St. Benedict, which is the only written record left, and we'll tell you more about that. As a young man, Benedict's family sent him to Rome to study. Disgusted at the moral decline in the city, Benedict interrupted his studies and withdrew into solitude, seeking God. For 3 years, Benedict lived as a hermit in a cave in the mountains of Subiaco, under the direction of another hermit named Romanus. Some shepherds discovered Benedict's cave and recognized him as a servant of God. The shepherds also brought Benedict food, and he in turn would feed them spiritual food for their souls.
And we talked about the hermits of the early 3rd century and all that. But anyways, Benedict found a cave and he retreated into this cave and basically locked himself away. He was there for about 3 years. During the time that he was there, he was confronted with his own reality, his sinful nature, I guess you could call it, whatever. But he found himself attacked by demons. And these demons came to him in images of all the passions and emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. And I'm going to read, who was it we were talking about? St. Augustine, how he went to the extreme. Well, you're going to read a good example of that here. This is actually taken from the book of St. Gregory, the dialogue book. This is the account of an incident in Benedict's life when he was overcome with these temptations when he felt the demon was attacking him. One day while the saint was alone, the tempter came in the form of a little blackbird, which began to flutter in front of his face. It kept so close that he could have easily caught it in his hand. Instead, he made the sign of the cross, and the bird flew away. The moment it left, he was seized with an unusually violent temptation. The evil spirit recalled to his mind a woman he had once seen, and before he realized it, his emotions were carrying him away. Almost overcome in the struggle, he was at the point of abandoning the lonely wilderness, when suddenly, with the help of God's grace, he came to himself. And this is how he came to himself. Just then he noticed a thick patch of nettles and briars next to him. Throwing his garment aside, he flung himself naked into the sharp thorns and stinging nettles. He rolled around and tossed in the nettles until his whole body was in pain and covered in blood. Yet once he had conquered the pleasure through the suffering, his torn and bleeding skin served as a drain to drain away the poison of temptation from his body. Before long, the pain that was burning his whole body had put out the fires of evil in his heart. It was by exchanging these two fires that he gained the victory over sin. So complete was his triumph that from that moment on, as he later told his disciples, he never experienced another temptation of its kind. So we're talking about going to the extreme.
Yeah.
Good thing a cold shower.
Yeah. He didn't have running water in the cave.
Yeah, in the water in the cave.
He was in a cave, remember? Word of Benedict's holiness and miracles brought a nearby community of monks who asked him to be their abbot after their own abbot had died. Benedict tried to discourage them by refusing their request, warning them that his way of life would never complement their way of life. But the monks kept insisting, and Benedict accepted. However, the monks soon resisted Benedict's strict leadership and tried to poison him by giving him poisoned wine during a meal. But when Benedict blessed the wine and meal by making the sign of the cross over it with his hand, the container of wine shattered, and Benedict realized the wine was poisoned. He gathered the community together, he forgave them, and told them to find an abbot to their liking, and he left. Benedict returned to Subiaco, where his wisdom and reputation attracted more followers who wanted to hear the message of Christ from him. As his followers grew, Benedict set up some monasteries where monks lived in community.
There was a priest in the nearby church named Florentius who became very envious of Benedict and Benedict's work and the fact that a lot of people were going to him. Florentius tried to poison Benedict with some poisoned bread. And when this failed, Florentius sent some young girls to dance in front of Benedict's monks' cells to try to tempt the monks. Benedict then took a few monks with him and he left the monastery. And again, I'm going to read it because it's actually, I find some of these things kind of fun. Bear in mind, he was in the 5th century, 6th century, 400.
You need to preface this by, do not attempt this at home.
Yeah,
I had a shower.
At mealtime, a raven used to come out of the nearby woods to receive food from the saint's hands. On this occasion, he set the poisoned loaf in front of it and said, this is a poisoned loaf that Florentius had sent him. He sat in front of the bird and said, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, take this bread and carry it to a place where no one will be able to find it. The raven started to caw and circle around the loaf with an open beak, and flapping its wings as if to indicate that it was willing to obey, but found it impossible to do so. Several times the saint repeated the command, take the bread, he said, and do not be afraid. Take it away from here and leave it where nobody can find it. After hesitating for a long while, the raven finally took the loaf in its beak and flew away. 3 hours later, when he had disposed of the bread, the raven returned and received its usual meal from the hands of the man of God. The saintly abbot now realized how deep the resentment of his enemy was, and he felt grieved not so much for his own sake, but for the priest's sake. But Florentius, after his failure to do away with the master, determined instead to destroy the souls of the disciples, and for this purpose he sent 7 depraved women into the garden of Benedict's monastery. There they joined hands and danced together for some time within the sight of his followers in an attempt to lead them into sin. When the saint noticed this from his window, he began to fear that some of his younger monks would go astray. Convinced that the priest's hatred for him was the real cause for this attack, he let the envy have its way. Taking only a few monks with him, he left the monastery to find a new home. In the statue we have up here, there's a little raven depicted at his feet with the loaf of bread. That's what that signifies. This particular incident in his life when the raven took the poisoned loaf and flew away with it.
From Subiaco, Benedict moved and settled at Monte Cassino in 525.
That's Monte Cassino, right?
Modern day Monte Cassino.
That's today in Reading.
Yes. Benedict's reputation of holiness, wisdom, and miracles continued to spread far and wide. This attracted disciples to him in the monastery. In 529, Benedict founded the monastery that became the roots of the church's monastic system at Monte Cassino. It is here that Benedict wrote his famous rule. Benedict also had a twin sister named Scholastica, who later became Saint Scholastica, who also shared in Benedict's vision. Under his direction, she formed a cloistered monastery for women near Monte Cassino. Saint Scholastica is considered the first Benedictine nun. Benedict died in 547 while standing in prayer before God. He was canonized as saint in 1220. His memorial is July the 11th. Benedict had the ability to read consciousness, gift of prophecy, and the ability to forestall attacks of the devil. He is a patron saint of civil engineer, the dying, these are farmers, gallstones, kidney disease, monks, school children, the homeless, poisoning, and speleologists.
Speleologists.
Speleologists. Those are the people that study caves.
Since he lived in a cave, since he lived in a spelunker,
Spelunker, that's the person who studied caves.
People that study caves.
Speleologists. He is also the patron saint of witchcraft.
no,
Against
against
witchcraft. I didn't know that. The intercession of Saint Benedict is known to stave off temptation and the forces of evil. So if you get tempted by depraved women or men, you can pray for Benedict.
So now we'll actually go into his spirituality, Benedictine spirituality. Benedictine spirituality is a way of life that helps a person seek God and God's will daily by living our ordinary life in the presence of God. It encourages a balance of one's life of worship, spiritual reading, and work in the context of community. And there's kind of like two parts to it. We're going to cover both. The first one is the actual rule of Saint Benedict.
Yeah. Which contains 73 chapters that teach the basic monastic virtues of humility, silence, obedience, and directives for daily living. Common sense, a life of prayer, study, work, and life under one's superior. The rule also calls for stability and commitment. Live in a community in which Christ is seen in each person. Stewardship of all created things which come from the hand of God. Hospitality which receives and cares for each person as Christ. Obedience to God. Personal transformation. Care for the ill, and living a lifestyle of love centered on Christ. Benedict also wrote the rule for lay people living in community. Benedict and most of the monks were oblates, lay people who take vows and live in a monastery or have a relationship with one nearby. Benedict and most of the monks were not ordained.
That surprised me when I read
Yeah.
about it. You think
He
he was a priest,
got
but he wasn't. He was a lay person who set himself apart. He stayed a lay person his entire life. Again, as we were preparing this and all this, reading the rule of St. Benedict, which he wrote for life in the monastery, there's 73 of them. Obviously, I'm not going to read all of them, but in going through them, he's got rules for just about everything you can think of living in a monastery with a community. And some of them are actually kind of funny, I think. I'll read one. I'll read a few of them. The sleeping arrangements of monks. The monks are to sleep in separate beds. They receive bedding as provided by the abbot, suitable to monastic life. If possible, all are to sleep in one place, but should the size of the community preclude this, they will sleep in groups of 10 or 20 under the watchful care of seniors. A lamp must be kept burning in the room until morning. They sleep clothed, girded with belts or cords. They should remove their knives, lest they accidentally cut themselves in their sleep. That's the right.
Wise.
I'll remember that.
Thus the monks will always be ready to arise without delay when the signal is given. Each will hasten to arrive at the work of God before the others, yet with all dignity and decorum. The younger brothers should not have their beds next to each other, but interspersed among those of the seniors. On arising for the work of God, they will quietly encourage each other for the sleepy like to make excuses. That's one of them. Here's one that says, a manner for reproving boys, because apparently they accepted all kinds. They accepted lay people, priests, even a lot of the noble families around Rome at the time would take their kids to the monasteries. So he had something for reproving boys. Every age and level of understanding should receive appropriate treatment. Therefore, as often as boys and the young, or those who cannot understand the seriousness of the penalty of excommunication, are guilty of misdeeds, they should be subjected to severe fasts or checked with sharp strokes so that they may heal. Now I know where the nuns got that.
Not everybody.
No, not everybody. Couple more. This one's about the proper amount of drink. It is therefore with some uneasiness that we specify the amount of food and drink for others. However, with the due regard for the infirmities of the sick, we believe that a half bottle of wine a day is sufficient for each. He goes on and talks a little bit about, well, if your gift is not to drink, that's okay too, don't drink. But we, depending on the type of work they do and the heat of the day, if we feel you need more, we'll give you some more. And at the end it says, however, where local circumstances dictate an amount much less than what is stipulated above or even none at all, those who live there shall bless God and be humble. Above all, we should admonish them to refrain from grumbling. So they can't grumble. And the last one I'm going to read is, as I said, priests also came to the monasteries, and they wanted admittance, they wanted to come into the monastery. But he didn't give the priest like any privileges. A priest was a regular guy. It says, if any ordained priest asks to be received into the monastery, do not agree too quickly. However, if he is fully persistent in his request, he must realize that he will have to observe the full discipline of the rule without any mitigation, knowing what it is written. He should, however, be allowed to stand next to the abbot to give blessings and to celebrate Mass, providing the abbot bids him. So in other words, the abbot had to give permission to say Mass and give blessings. The part I like is at the bottom, it says, when there is a question of an appointment of or any business in the monastery, he takes a place that corresponds to the date of his entry into the community, and not that granted out of respect of his priesthood. In other words, it was all seniority. Rank didn't have his privileges in the monastery. They didn't care who you were. But anyways, those are just some of them. I just, like I said, picked out 4 of them I kind of thought were funny, but there's 73 of them
And I said, don't
that
read
he
all
wrote
73.
to govern the lives of the monasteries.
St. Benedict's message, his message was, one of them was living in the presence of God. We have that there. And Benedict did not recognize the need to separate oneself from the world in order to be with God. When we are in the world, we are also in God, and present to the Creator of all things, whose gaze is upon us wherever we may be. Everything we do should witness to the experience of the God who is present in all things. Living in the presence of God shapes all areas of our lives: our prayer, work, interaction with creation, and our relationship with others. According to Benedict, God speaks to us in the words of Scripture. The Lord also speaks to us through people, even a younger person who has less knowledge and experience than us.
The second part of his message is ora et labora, or prayer and work. Benedict sees no contradiction between work and prayer. Work is to help us pray well and prayer is to help us do our work well. Work helps us to pray and should itself become prayer. Benedict writes, idleness is an enemy of the soul. Therefore, the brothers should have specified times for manual labor as well as for prayerful reading. When we join prayer and work will also be a spiritual life for us that does not separate us from God.
He also mentioned discretio, which is the gift of discernment. The gift of discernment of spirits is another of Benedict's characteristics. The judgment should not be clouded with one's own ego, desires, and needs. Benedict saw discretion as a virtue of arranging all things in such a way that the strong are attracted and the weak are not frightened away. He did not preach a religion of the strong. Today, many people are beginning to listen to the Spirit of God and only make decisions after they have listened to God in prayer.
The fourth one is Pax Benedicta, or Benedictine peace. The Benedictine ideal for people is not that of one who achieves and accomplishes things, but a person who knows how to bring people together and creates around themselves an atmosphere of peace and mutual understanding. And one of the most important challenges Benedict puts before us is to be a positive person who can build people up instead of tearing them down.
This is the last one. Stabilitas, which means like order. Benedict felt that a community of people who remain together for life could be a place of security for many. Stability or order was a medicine for the restless era of the great tribal migrations of this time. Today we can see an increasing aversion to commitment, yet the soul senses that it needs solid roots and stability to grow. Benedictine stability invites us to pay attention to our roots, and its purpose is to encourage us to decide, to commit ourselves, to accept ties. The basic focus of Benedictine spirituality is pray and work. Always take time to pray each day. Spiritual practices are divine reading, Lectio Divina, and the Liturgy of the Hours.
We're all kind of familiar with Lectio Divina. I think we learned that in our first year. And also reading the Liturgy of the Hours. That's basically what he pushed on his monks in order to achieve all the things that he was talking about. I gave everybody a little Benedict medal, but we have a little blow up here. We read earlier how Benedict is like the patron saint of trying to keep evil away. He was good at fending off the devil and so on and so forth. And the medal itself is like a prayer of exorcism. And on the front of the medal, we have a blow up here, but you can look at the one I gave you. Is an image of Saint Benedict, and on one hand, in his left hand, he's holding the rule that he wrote, and the cross is in his right hand. Around the edge of the medal is a phrase. It's in Latin. I'll try to say it. Aius in obitu nostro praesentia muniamur. English is, may we at our death be fortified by his presence. And on the back of the medal is where he has a whole bunch of stuff. He's got a cross right in the middle, and then in each little section of the cross he has CSPB. And basically what that is the crux sancti patris benedicti, the cross of our Holy Father Benedict. A cross, or up and down, on the member of the cross that goes up and down, he has CSSML. Crux Sancta Sit Mihi Lux. May this holy cross be my light. And on the cross beam he has NDSMD. Nunquam Draco Sit Mihi Dux. May the dragon never be my guide. Then when you start going around the medal, starting up here at the very top, he has VRS. And I'll go through that. VRS is Vadi Retro Satana. Be gone, Satan. NSVM is Nunquam Surua Mihi Vana. Never tempt me with your vanities. SMQL. Sunt mala quae libras. What you offer me is evil. IVB is Ipse Veniae Vivas, drink the poison yourself. And at the very top, it's Pax, P-A-X, for the peace of Benedict. That whole thing is, like I said, a prayer of exorcism for him. It's to ward off evil. And then the little holy cards.
Yeah, the holy card that we passed out, as you can see, he's holding the chalice that was without the poison, and we prayed over it and cracked.
The snake was in
And the
it.
snake is in it, it's like poison and that. So it portrays, some cards portray him with the chalice, others with the book. And
There's a chalice on the metal too. Right?
No, I don't think so.
is
Right
there one
hand.
in there? I don't see it.
On the
Yeah,
right
there
hand.
is.
Well, the metal has
The other
a
side.
Yeah, the
raven.
right side, no, the
Raven.
metal, there's a chalice right there too.
Yeah, there is a
Yeah.
On the
So
bottom.
the raven's there too.
Raven.
Left hand
So all
side.
those, yeah, the amethyst.
But these photos here, as we said earlier, this is Monte Cassino in Italy, as it appears today. This is like, you could say, the headquarters of the Benedictines. That's the big, you guys, I guess, have been there, Ken, or Diane and Joe said they were there. Beautiful place. We just passed by it.
I just waited
You
to
know,
read.
Like I say, the medal's on the other side. And these three things here that we have, St. Benedict is big. I got a crucifix on here, but here's another one. He has a crucifix with his medal right there. It's a St. Benedict's crucifix. The middle picture is he had a vision. He had many visions, but one of the visions he had is he saw the world as a sunbeam light of God. And there he's standing in the middle with a lot of his disciples around him, and the sunbeam, going up towards God. The last picture over there on the other side is on this guy in the pink, or rose, shall we say, is St. Gregory, the one who wrote about him, and St. Benedict's on the other side, and they're both kneeling in prayer to the Blessed Mother. Our statue, we kind of explained that already. And then just little quick notes here, because it's interesting reading about him. 9 popes have been Benedictines. I didn't know that. Other religious orders that followed the Benedictine spirituality and kind of formed their own